And the industry would be production?
The landscape.
The landscape, sorry, landscape. And then neighborhood community policing forums. The alternative regime would be SAPS.
SAPS, yeah. SAPS. That's a nice one.
And then the landscape would be public safety.
Yeah, absolutely. So what changes in public safety that requires a new way of policing maybe? What could be the threats? What are the crises?
In public safety?
So police don't ever get to the scene of the crime.
There's also another like blind spot with this kind of stuff, which is like the subjectivity of us citizens in recognizing crime. So once you like take something out of a framework, like the police has to follow the constitutional and like other legal frameworks, then you have like these little policing forums where they decide for themselves within their space what is a crime, which is beneficial in some contexts but also problematic. It's the same reason why we don't have the death penalty, because of that same subjectivity.
Interesting. Quite a social one, I like it. You guys?
We had a small social alternative technical in which we looked at lobbying for prevention or banning of alcohol advertising. So related to the brewers and alcohol companies who perpetuate that paradigm. And obviously the competing regimes are those who have entrenched interests. So basically she means those the retailers, wholesalers, the marketers, as well as the producers. And the landscape in which they're operating, in which they potentially would like to change, is that of the culture of drinking in South Africa and the negatives associated with it. So basically,
that's an interesting one.
Looking at sport as a means of, so basically looking at sport and how it's been monopolized by SAP and Castle.
So these little examples, I hope have got you thinking in terms of how almost everything in society is not just in isolation, it's always competing for dominance. And it could be a technology, it could be a social movement. There's always this competition and it's dynamic, it's moving all the time between these different layers. And when things happen on the landscape level, it actually creates opportunities for change. And that's how transitions come about. So landscapes and landscape changes normally take a very long time to change, and they're gradual fluctuations. I would say landscapes are almost like those techno-economic paradigms that I showed you, the steam engine, to rail transport. The ones that I showed, the conductive cycles, those are like landscapes that take a very long time to change. And the one that we're entering at the moment is probably, the information technology revolution, the biotech revolution, and the sustainability revolution. Those are new landscapes which are changing. The one thing that none of you guys really mentioned so much was environmental pressures on existing systems. What are environmental things like climate change going to do to our regimes? For example, the wine industry. It's going to place a lot of pressure on some of my favorite wine farms, and this is a real problem. No, but honestly, so these guys are actually having to adapt the kind of grape, already thinking 20, 30 years ahead, that can grow in warmer temperatures. And there's a little niche in Stellenbosch, which is a technology which is being supported by a couple of companies there that are already testing new grape varieties and apple varieties and fruit varieties that can grow at warmer temperatures, which is really interesting. So that's an example of how the environment and the pressures that we're creating on the environment are starting to create serious shocks in the system. So rapid external shocks are also part of the landscape, which create opportunities for transitions and innovations to actually come about. Climate change is probably the biggest reason why we need to start moving towards alternative means of transport and alternative means of production. Yeah. So these difficulties allow niches windows of opportunity to develop and actually compete with regimes, or actually influence that regime to an extent that it swallows up this new technology, which is better. So this is quite a theoretical diagram. I don't want to delve too deep, but if you're interested in this stuff, it's really worth reading some of these articles, because so this is the landscape basically, and it puts pressure on the landscape, which changes, disrupts the regime. This is what we call the window of opportunity, and this is where the new niche, as you can see, it's multiple little innovations that are happening all the time that eventually comes in and replaces the existing regime. But this is quite a theoretical diagram. So basically, from this diagram's perspective, this niche is able, because there's a crack in this landscape, there's pressure on this regime, and the niche is able to move up and compete. So here's a nice little story about landscape changes. What is this? Any idea?
It's a nuclear power plant.
Hey, you can tell your age.
In 1910.
Okay. So this is, you're right, it's the Chernobyl disaster.
That was in Ukraine.
In Ukraine.
It was in Ukraine, you're right. But it actually had a huge impact. It was a landscape impact that led to a referendum in Austria, who'd actually just built a new power plant and were ready to commission it. And they had a national vote, referendum, and they decided to ban nuclear power. And they turned that facility into a research facility instead. So they banned nuclear power. What did this do, suddenly, to the regime? What did this do to the regime that was in place?
Shifted its focus.
Destroyed.
It created a huge window of opportunity for solar technology. And that's why Austria today is one of the leading solar technology manufacturers in terms of the thinking and the technology development in the world. And this actually led to one of the most competitive green tech clusters in the world in Austria. I actually spent a year there studying this and how this happened, which was very, very interesting. How they, just a couple of events in the landscape of their economy led to a whole, new sector in the economy around clean technologies and sustainable technologies. Right. So to summarize, transitions. They are multi-actor phenomena. So they include a wide range of actors: firms, consumers, NGOs, research institutes, and governments. They're multi-factor. So they're a result of multiple different competing aspects that interplay, as opposed to one single factor. It's not just about the technology coming to play. It's about the technology being tried and tested and redeveloped and prototyped, and then it becomes taken up by society. It's really about society that decides. And then it's about the multiple levels and the competition between those multiple levels, and how the technology actually has an opportunity to compete with the regime and become used in society. Right. Social innovation and transitions are actually synonymous. There's a great need for more social innovation in terms of new ways of thinking at the niche level to compete with those ways and dominant ways of thinking around solving problems at the regime level. Right, so it's here that transitions through social innovation is needed most. And it's also about innovation systems. So how do we actually slowly change the thinking within our innovation systems from this techno-utopian way of solving problems, and through big science we'll solve problems. There's actually a story I could tell you about the wind turbine industry in the USA, because we were talking about that earlier, and and how America, do things big. And in Denmark, there were two systems that actually were, they're like a couple of experiments, a couple of niches around in Denmark, and there are a couple of niches in the USA. And the USA decided, okay, we're going to crack this nut on wind energy. So they got like NASA scientists and engineers, and they spent millions on research and development and prototyping to build their wind energy industry. And basically what Denmark did was, instead of having these big programs, they incrementally grew on what they knew. And because they had a totally different culture, they shared information with each other. Whereas in America, they had like competing camps with two universities, like, we're going to develop the best wind turbine. And in the end, it was quite interesting that the Danish wind turbine manufacturers became the global dominant wind turbine manufacturers in the world, which is a totally different way. It was because of their culture and their way of thinking and solving problems and sharing information. It was much more of an open innovation approach to innovation, and the ones in America was kind of the commercialization, commercialized research through big science and big money approach, which actually was outcompeted like 10 times by the Danish. So the Danish at that time owned like 70% of the global market share of wind turbine production. Interesting story. So, I think we'll skip that. Now we come to the last part, which is really about how do we manage transitions. So there's two fundamental aspects to transitions. Transitions happen, and they're going to happen, and they're going to happen through the free market and free market forces. But when it comes to sustainability, is this enough? Is the market and our regulations within the market enough to transition us to sustainability? What do you think, guys? Yes. You think it is? The market is going to be enough? Because there are many market failures.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's enough. I think it's a shock, and the process needs to be held and dealt with accordingly. You can't just, if you just shift things too quickly and the process isn't facilitated or held or managed, if you use that word, then perhaps there's going to be a regression back to old practice.
That presumes so that we know what the right way is to do it, and we don't necessarily. Yes, there can be cleaner ways to do it, there can be different ways of doing it, but if you're going to, you can help a transition to happen, you can influence that transition, you can play with aspects of it, but the final outcome of that transition will never be within your final control.
No,
because the system is too complex in order to be able to have complete control out of it. Therefore, if you try and control that shock, you may end up actually doing more damage.
You guys are talking about two different things. Yeah. The one is control.
Yeah, I'm not talking about control.
Control and steering of transitions. Is that possible?
Yeah, I think
and the other is, will the free market solve our problems? This is the point. Like, is the free market enough? Is it currently solving the problems of sustainability in terms of the trajectories that we are going? Certainly not.
Like you said earlier about business being reactionary, and you mentioned that governments will put up or change the regulatory environment and the businesses react to it.
Yeah.
And even just that sort of sums up the dilemma, because this kind of transition that's necessary won't. Reacting is not enough. One needs to be proactive, and one needs to assist in facilitating a different regime.
That's a nice point.
So what I would suggest is that it might actually lie in the re-identification of the nation state and the role of the nation state, just like Europe is kind of going through.
Yeah.
Are we not doing this course now purely because of market forces?
I hope that it's more than that. I hope that it's because of our we're going into a deep philosophical debate here, I feel.
I'm doing this course to make money.
Yeah, it's all about the money, guys. Okay. Let's discuss that at Universidad. No, look, I hear what you're saying, and it's a big debate, free market forces, and I mean, it's been a debate for a long time. But I personally don't think that the system is clean enough or not uncorrupted. I mean, the system is so corrupted in terms of putting those legislations in place to make, you know, big corporates respond in the right way. It's certainly not fast enough, and a lot of the stuff at the moment, the decisions that they're making are going in totally the wrong direction. So the point I'm trying to make is, how do citizens, how do innovators, how do entrepreneurs, how do the people, not governments, not universities, not big science, actually start creating niches from the bottom up as an alternative? Okay. So transition management is now the belief that we can actually steer or guide transitions. Innovation is the absolute key, and having innovation policy and creating markets, yes, for innovation is part of it. Absolutely, we need to do that. We need to be able to pay for innovation. We need to be able to pay for science and research to be able to innovate. It's definitely the market. We cannot escape the market, yes, but I don't think it's enough. There needs to be more. Okay. And the reason is that persistent problems often are not solved by the market. And that's what persistent problems are. They're the things that cannot be solved necessarily by the market, and they're requiring special interventions by governments or by policymakers to change things. And wicked problems are similar. They're problems that are moving targets. When you try to create an intervention in that problem, the problem morphs and it changes. That's what complex problems are about, wicked problems. They change. You can't identify the root cause of that problem. Those problems are morphing and changing because of the changing environments that the problems are in as well. And that's what transition management is all about, is trying to identify and manage the process. So, persistent problems are related to our system failures that crept into our societal systems that, contrary to market failures, cannot be corrected by the market or current policies. And system failures are locked-in flaws in our societal structures, such as technological bias, which we see a lot of, weak or dominant networks, institutional barriers, and path dependency, which we've spoken about already. So as I've said, it's not about actually managing that transition, because that's almost impossible, but it's about creating a target to transition to. And we're going to talk about that in a moment. But it's really about not using the same framework or system which created the problem. It's about stepping outside of the box, trying to create a new system that's potentially linked, create a new system altogether. Because remember, right at the beginning, we need a factor 10 shift if we're going to achieve sustainability, which is going to require radical innovations, out-of-the-box thinking, system innovation, complete change in systems altogether, new systems. So that's a change and an innovation in the actual structures in our society. Those social structures, the actual physical infrastructure. Who's driven to Stellenbosch lately? Have you seen that new bloody highway that they built there? Why didn't they use that money to put into the railway system? Because there's a mono track, okay? You can drive from Cape Town to Somerset West in 45 minutes on the fast train. There's a fast train that leaves in the morning, a business train. They can't do that to Stellenbosch because there's only one track. It just does not make sense to me. That to me was a a result of sunken costs with decisions made in the past. Now they've built a double-lane highway that's going to Stellenbosch, and the infrastructure within Stellenbosch can't actually handle that kind of traffic. It's absolutely ridiculous. That's a great example of, extending the same problem. And it's the roads again. Yeah.
No, I was just going to say it's pretty similar to the Fourways area in Joburg, and where they're building all of those housing developments all around it. There's only two kind of like main roads, so there's traffic every single day for hours on end. All of these complexes and millions of people within those complexes trying to get to work or to school at the same time. It's just
madness.
Yeah.
I wonder what the Gautrain. The Gautrain is a great opportunity, but like, is it ever going to compete on a national level? It's supposed to be.
Yeah, the buses don't even go to like those areas.
It's not functioning as it should.
Yeah, it's only if you live in like Sandton or maybe in a specific area in Victoria or whatever.
So is this infrastructural problems, or is it actually like planning and social structures and like falling back into our old ways of doing things? So it's up to you guys to change the thing. So it's the culture. It's really about the culture, and that's where social innovation is going to be so important, is in changing cultures. By embedding new ways of doing things into our societies, by actually embedding an infrastructure as well. I think the culture has changed a lot since we've had some success with the Gautrain, right? It's changed the culture somewhat into giving us some kind of hope that we can have a public rail transport system. But we need to do more. We need to do more. And then it's about practices, so innovating practices and ways of doing things. The manner of implementation, I like that. So the way in which we implement the toilet solution, and we need to innovate around that. And self-reflection at the individual actor level, which is quite interesting. So as I said, there are these two aspects to transitions. Transitions are going to happen, they are going to occur naturally through market forces. And then there's target-oriented transitions, which is really about saying, this is the goal, this is where we have to get to. Let us try to devise some steering mechanism to get there. And visions are extremely important. And this is what I feel South Africa lacks in many ways, but also, at the top leadership level. The NDP is probably the best thing we've got in terms of a vision for the future of this country. But there needs to be a lot more leadership to execute that vision. And also at the community level, we need proper leadership with proper projects to be able to drive those visions. And that's why I think there's a really big potential for transition management in South Africa to make a big impact. Because it requires activism, it requires innovators, it requires bottom-up change and experimentation in society, actually implementing our solutions and testing and trial and error. And that's where innovation and entrepreneurship is going to be so important. So a management perspective looks at how influences with a coherent vision for sustainability may affect societal shifts towards sustainability. So transition management is a process, which is really interesting, and there's a whole lot of literature which I can share with you if you want to. It's about first understanding what the transition arena is. So what is the space, or what is the socio-technical aspect that we are trying to achieve? What are the existing pitfalls, and what are the existing challenges, but what is actually trying to be done in that space? And then it's really around gathering people to be part of creating a vision. And it's difficult to create one vision, especially in diverse communities. trying to create a vision in a place like Stellenbosch is like herding cats. Because you have the Stellenbosch Mafia, billionaires, and you have colored community, and you have the students, and you have the black community, and they have completely different values. So transition management in a place like South Africa is particularly difficult because you have to actually build bridges around creating visions. And that's where social innovation is going to become so important, and stakeholder management. But remember, your technologies and your solutions and your concepts are not going to work unless there's buy-in and take-up by the communities. And one way to get that is through building visions. So how do we build strong visions in our communities? How do we actually do it? Who's got an idea? Do you have an idea? How do we build visions in our communities?
Create a mentor or a role model so that people can follow his, like Nelson Mandela was in the country. Right?
Okay, how do we bring that down to the local level? Yeah?
By like sort of engaging them right from the beginning and having them part of the call to action. So sort of asking them what they need before trying to create something they need which they might not need.
Huh.
Understanding.
Or like understanding at the beginning. Definitely making them part of the process from the start.
Couldn't you create almost a rallying cry or a war cry sort of thing that they're actually able to rally around? And then you use that as your central purpose for developing that area. One example of this, you can even take it from politics here in South Africa with the EFF, where they created a single rallying cry which people have then built into, and then you're able to use that momentum for social change.
Yeah, EFF are very, very good at marketing. But what is the actual vision? I don't really know. What is their vision? Transformation.
That's a whole different question.
Yeah.
But you've got the rallying call that mobilizes people for that transitional change.
And how do we create, I'm talking about visions like, for example, in a community, and trying to create a project around, I mean, should we block Long Street off or not?
Yes.
For example, open streets, like there's competing paradigms and competing ideas around that. How do you create a process to get to a vision of, yes, we want this, or no, we don't want this?
We've been talking about identifying values. It's really important.
Yeah. So how do we identify values? It's about understanding who's there, first of all. Understanding the stakeholders, right? And what, everybody actually has a vision. If you actually ask them quietly, like a certain question, you'd understand that everyone has got a vision, everyone's got an aspiration. It's more about giving everybody a chance to talk in a way that they don't feel threatened, that their vision is going to be undermined or not appreciated. That's what I found in the work that I did. So you actually go and listen to each person individually, or each group individually. And what was really interesting in Stellenbosch, in the work that I did, was when you get everybody in the room, it's like, you get these guys that flare up and say, but what about like sanitation? But it's actually like, it's just one or two guys that are trying to create conflict for the sake of conflict often, or they're like trying to express their concerns in an inconstructive way. And they blame each other for everything. We like to blame each other in South Africa. Blame lots of blame going on. And then we took and isolated each of these groups, like the university, the municipality, big business, civil society, and the different, and you did visioning exercises with each of those groups. 99% of the vision was the same.
But then did you bring them back together and make them know that that was the same? So they
Yes.
didn't feel like that.
We did. And we had 150 participants in a room building a vision for the future of Stellenbosch, which was really, really interesting. But we first showed everybody that everybody's vision was actually 99% the same. Everyone actually wanted the same thing at the end of the day. And we used that commonality as the starting point. And then we started fleshing out on the differences. And the devil is in the detail, let me tell you, because that process is still going on. But at least the process was spoken about, at least people were heard. And decisions were taken and decisions were made around the direction of where Stellenbosch is going to go. And the direction was, we're not going to become an industrial society. We're not going to build factories in Stellenbosch. Everybody agreed on that. So that's one thing. The other option was, which was no option at all, we're going to stay the same. And the other option was, we're going to become a knowledge society. We're going to become a learning hub, a place for experimentation. And actually everyone agreed on that. So we got it. There was a vision for Stellenbosch, which was really interesting. And now I'm very interested in doing the same process around Philippi Village. That's going to be very interesting and very, very challenging as well, to do that kind of work. But transition management is a social process. It's about creating a goal. And it's also specifically about sustainability. It's about how do we socially engage, but also create solutions which are technological solutions for sustainability. The next step in transition management is about understanding your resources. So you might have a good plan, but if you don't have the right resources, you have no plan at all. So your plan has to be, and your vision has to be good enough so that it can attract the right resources. And this is as important for your prototypes and your concepts when you try to bring them to market. And then it's about evaluating as you go along, incrementally. As you try to achieve and implement your plan, it's continuously revising the vision and where you're going in a reflexive manner. So understanding what you're doing all the time and adjusting. It's not a static thing. So the strategy in transition management is always changing. There's no fixed strategy. It's a moving target. And this is a great example of why I believe individuals and passionate people and entrepreneurs and groups of people and activists are going to make the biggest change if they can break through that regime. It's because of political cycles. Last 5 years, once again in Stellenbosch you have a great example. So we've got this fantastic vision, and now it's the mayor's vision. And when the mayor, loses his election, another mayor comes along. Okay, new vision, guys, and he starts that whole process again. And all the resources are allocated to a new project. That happens all the time in the municipal level in South Africa. That really has to change. So what do we as activists, how does the vision become the town's vision? How does the vision become the community's vision? So it's not owned by politics. As soon as we crack that nut in South Africa, we're going to make progress. But it's not an easy thing. It's not an easy thing to do. Okay, so now I've got a little video for you, which speaks about these aspects. I hope it's going to work. Yeah, warning. Really, yeah?
Somalia.
cool. Okay. So cute. Go with you. Just smash it.
Yeah. Okay. Come on, do this continue. Should I just restart it then?
Projects of technical cooperation with African countries. I worked for an Italian NGO, and every single project that we set up in Africa failed. And I was distraught. I thought, age 21, that we Italians were good people and we were doing good work in Africa. Instead, everything we touched, we killed. Our first project, the one that has inspired my first book, Ripples from the Zambezi, was a project where we Italians decided to teach Zambian people how to grow food. So we arrived there with Italian seeds in southern Zambia, in this absolutely magnificent valley, going down to the Zambezi River, and we taught the local people how to grow Italian tomatoes and zucchini. And of course the local people had absolutely no interest in doing that, so we paid them to come and work, and sometimes they would show up. And we were amazed that the local people in such fertile valley would not have any agriculture. And, but instead of asking them how come they were not growing anything, we simply said, thank God we're here. Just in the nick of time to save the Zambian people from starvation. And of course, everything in Africa grew beautifully, and we had these magnificent tomatoes. In Italy, a tomato would grow to this size, in Zambia to this size. And we could not believe. And we were telling the Zambians, look how easy agriculture is. When the tomatoes were nice and ripe and red, overnight, some 200 hippos came out from the river and they ate everything. And we said to the Zambians, my God, the hippos! And the Zambia said, yes, that's why we have no agriculture here. Why didn't you tell us? You never asked. I thought it was only us Italians blundering around Africa, but then I saw what the Americans were doing, what the English were doing, what the French were doing, and after seeing what they were doing, I became quite proud of our project in Zambia, because you see, at least we fed the hippos. You should see the rubbish. You should see the rubbish that we have bestowed on unsuspecting African people. You want to read the book? Read Dead Aid by Dambisa Moyo, Zambian woman economist. The book was published in 2009. We, Western donor country, have given the African continent $2 trillion American in the last 50 years. I'm not going to tell you the damage that the money has done. Just go and read her book. Read it from an African woman, the damage that we have done. We Western people are imperialist, colonialist, and missionarists. And there are only two ways we deal with people. We either patronize them, or we are paternalistic. The two words come from the Latin root pater, which means father, but they mean two different things. Paternalistic, I treat anybody from a different culture as if they were my children. I love you so much. Patronizing, I treat everybody from another culture as if they were my servants. That's why the white people in Africa are called Bwana, boss. I was given a slap in the face reading a book, Small is Beautiful, written by Schumacher, who said, above all in economic development, if people do not wish to be helped, leave them alone. This should be the first principle of aid. The first principle of aid is respect. This morning, the gentleman who opened this conference lay a stick on the floor and said, can you imagine a city that is not neocolonial? I decided when I was 27 years old to only respond to people. And I invented a system called enterprise facilitation, where you never initiate anything, you never motivate anybody, but you become a servant of the local passion, the servant of local people who have a dream to become a better person. So what you do, you shut up, you never arrive in a community with any ideas, and you sit with the local people. We don't work from offices. We meet at the cafe. We meet at the pub. We have zero infrastructure. And what we do, we become friends. And we find out what that person wants to do. The most important thing is passion. You can give somebody an idea. If that person doesn't want to do it, what are you going to do? The passion that the person has for her own growth is the most important thing. The passion that that man has for his own personal growth is the most important thing. And then we help them to go and find the knowledge, because nobody in the world can succeed alone. The person with the idea may not have the knowledge, but the knowledge is available. So years and years ago, I had this idea, why don't we for once, instead of arriving in a community to tell people what to do, why don't for once listen to them, but not in community meetings. Let me tell you a secret. There is a problem with community meetings. Entrepreneurs never come. And they never tell you in a public meeting what they want to do with their own money. What opportunity they want to find. So planning has this blind spot. The smartest people in your community, you don't even know, because they don't come to your public meetings. What we do, we work one-on-one. And to work one-on-one, you have to create a social infrastructure that doesn't exist. You have to create a new profession. The profession is the family doctor of enterprise, the family doctor of business, who sits with you in your house, at your kitchen table, at the cafe, and helps you find the resources to transform your passion into a way to make a living. I started this as a tryout in Esperance, in Western Australia. I was doing a PhD at the time, trying to go away from this patronizing bullshit that we arrive and tell you what to do. And so, what I did in Esperance that first year was to just walk the streets. And in 3 days, I had my first client. And I helped this first guy who was smoking fish from a garage, was a Maori guy. And I helped him to sell to the restaurant in Perth, to get organized. And then the fisherman came to me to say, you the guy who helped Maori, can you help us? And I helped these 5 fishermen to work together and get this beautiful tuna, not to the cannery in Albany for 60 cents a kilo, but we find a way to take the fish for sushi to Japan for $15 a kilo. And the farmers came to talk to me, say, hey, you help them, can you help us? In a year, I had 27 projects going on, and the government came to see me to say, how can you do that? How can you do? And I said, I do something very, very, very difficult. I shut up and listen to them. So the government says, do it again. We've done it in 300 communities around the world. We have helped to start 40,000 businesses. There is a new generation of entrepreneurs who are dying of solitude. Pieter, one of the greatest management consultants in history, died aged 96 a few years ago. Pieter was a professor of philosophy before becoming involved in business. And this is what Pieter says. Planning is actually incompatible with an entrepreneurial society and economy. Planning is the kiss of death of entrepreneurship. So now you're rebuilding Christchurch without knowing what the smartest people in Christchurch want to do with their own money and their own energy. You have to learn how to get these people to come and talk to you. You have to offer them confidentiality, privacy. You have to be fantastic at helping them. And then they will come, and they will come in droves. In a community of 10,000 people, we get 200 clients. Can you imagine in a community of 400,000 people, the intelligence and the passion? Which presentation have you uploaded the most this morning? Local, passionate people. That's who you have uploaded. So, what I'm saying is that entrepreneurship is where it's at. We are at the end of the first industrial revolution, non-renewable fossil fuels, manufacturing, and all of a sudden we have systems which are not sustainable. The internal combustion engine is not sustainable. Freon way of maintaining things is not sustainable. What we have to look at is at how we feed, cure, educate, transport, communicate for 7 billion people in a sustainable way. The technologies do not exist to do that. Who is going to invent the technology for the green revolution? Universities, forget about it. Government, forget about it. We'll be entrepreneurs, and they're doing it now. There's a lovely story that I read in a futurist magazine many years ago. There was a group of experts who were invited to discuss the future of the city of New York in 1860. And in 1860, this group of people came together and they all speculated about what would happen to the city of New York in 100 years. And the conclusion was unanimous. The city of New York will not exist in 100 years. Why? Because they look at the curve and say, if the population keeps growing at this rate, to move the population of New York around, they would have needed 6 million horses. And the manure created by 6 million horses would be impossible to deal with. They were already drowning in manure. So 1860, they are seeing this dirty technology that is going to choke the life out of New York. So what happens in 40 years' time, in year 1900, in the United States of America, there were 1,001 car manufacturing companies. 1,001. The idea of a funny different technology had absolutely taken over. And there were tiny little factories in backwaters, Dearborn, Michigan, Henry Ford. However, there is a secret to work with entrepreneurs. First, you have to offer them confidentiality, otherwise they don't come and talk to you. Then you have to offer them absolute dedicated, impassionate service to them. And then you have to tell them the truth about entrepreneurship. The smallest company, the biggest company, has to be capable of doing 3 things beautifully. The product that you want to sell has to be fantastic. You have to have fantastic marketing. And you have tremendous financial management. Guess what? We have never met a single human being in the world who can make it, sell it, and look after the money. Doesn't exist. This person has never been born. We've done the research, and we have looked at the 100 iconic companies of the world. Carnegie, Westinghouse, Edison, Ford, all the new companies, Google, Yahoo. There's only one thing that all the successful companies in the world have in common. Only one. None was started by one person. Now we teach entrepreneurship to 16 years old in Northumberland, and we start the class by giving them the first 2 pages of Richard Branson autobiography, and the task of the 16 years old is to underline in the first 2 pages of Richard Branson autobiography how many times Richard uses the word I and how many times he uses the word we. Never the word I and the word we, 32 times. He wasn't alone when he started. Nobody started a company alone. No one. So we can create a community where we have facilitators who come from a small business background, sitting in cafes, in bars, and are your dedicated buddies, who will go to you what somebody did for this gentleman who talked about, you know, this epic. Somebody who will say to you, what do you need? What can you do? Can you make it? Okay, can you sell it? Can you look after the money? Oh no, I cannot do this. Would you like me to find you somebody? We activate communities. We have groups of volunteers supporting the enterprise facilitator to help you to find resources and people. And we have discovered that the miracle of the intelligence of local people is such that you can change the culture and the economy of this community just by capturing the passion, the energy, and imagination of your own people. Thank you.
What do you think of this guy? He's pretty cool, eh? Animated in Italian, eh? Stop. So this guy actually is very keen to come to South Africa, and he might actually set up shop or some projects in stop.
What's his name?
Ernesto Ciroli. Yeah, so he might land up coming to Philippi Village to do some work there. Would you like him to come and, if he does come, have a talk?
Yeah.
Yes.
I think it would be quite fun to engage with somebody like that. So I wanted to do an exercise, but I think we can leave that for another time. But also what he said resonates a lot, I think, with transition management in the context of South Africa, which really needs this kind of activist mentality. And think about this as well in what you do and how you do it, about how you can be an activist in your community, and really listen to people and start making those changes. Right, I think that's it. Can I have my popular mechanics back, please? And then I'm going to go surfing or something. Cheers, enjoy the rest of your day.
Yeah. You see the stuff that some of the gamers trying to do.
They're trying to do a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
What exactly?
But we see what the big problem is.
The big problem. And
And
physical space.
they